Some steps for paraphrasing, and one thing, we have to read whatever the passage is that we're trying to paraphrase, whether it's a chapter or one line or a paragraph. And we have to read it carefully, and I would even advise rereading. And usually I annotate things as I go. If I'm reading something, it helps me draw the important points. It helps me think about it. So annotate, write notes on your copy of the article. Make sure you understand what it means, because if you don't, then you might mistranslate the meaning, misrepresent what the source said. Circle or underline some of the main points that you think are important. If there are any unfamiliar words in that text, you make sure you take time to look and see what it is, because that word that you're thinking about, you may think you know what it means, and it may mean the opposite of what you thought. So here again, that could lead you into misrepresenting your source. So, that's not very good as far as ethically. You need to remain true to what the author intended. And essentially, you're transposing or translating the passage, whatever it is, into your own words. And if you use these following tips, it will make it a little bit easier, hopefully. You simply avoid using the style or all the word choices of the original passage. Some words might be easier to borrow from the source. For example, nouns might be okay. If the source is talking about breakfast cereal and television ratings and cereal and children's programming, you could use all those terms at some point. But the thing is, what you don't want to do is borrow them in the same order with the same verbs and the same objects in the same line. So mainly if, usually, like I said, nouns are okay. Where do we run into trouble borrowing too much? Precise verbs, colorful adjectives, adverbs, word order. Sometimes it helps if you kind of rearrange things. Change descriptive words using synonyms. Synonyms meaning just words that mean the same or similar, have a similar meaning than the ones the author used. Condense when you can. Strive for concise rewrites. How long is a summary compared to the original? There's no, rule of thumb that I think of, because it all depends on what you're assigned to do. You might be in the workplace, and your boss may say, well, so-and-so just brought a book out on, it might be some kind of imaging tool or something that you're using, some sort of tool or process you're using at work. And he may say, why don't you, here's a copy of the book, won't you read this and give me an idea what it's about? Sometimes you know when you get an assignment that you're supposed to write a 3-page summary response paper. Kyle, which is what we're doing in English 111, right? Or somebody might say, here's this book, but I want a 1-paragraph summary of this whole book. And that's what you'll find when you look in the library, or it's like in the card catalog in the old days, or even now on virtual library, if you're looking in databases and looking at articles, they have what's called an abstract, which is just a very brief paragraph that gives essentially a few lines giving an overview of what the book's about. So if you just, you're trying to condense, you can't cover everything. And you have a reason when you decide to use that source, there's some particular reason why you chose it. And there's probably 2 or 3 things in that article that you want to make sure you mention. So you can be kind of the architect of how much detail you go into and where. But just remember that, you have to condense it somewhere, somehow. And how long it is determined by the person writing the summary or the instructor that assigns the assignment. Something of that sort. Put quotation marks. Open the quote, close the quote, around any words, phrases, or sentences that are from the source, that are directly from the source, word for word. And sometimes even if it's 2 or 3 words, like a word cluster, if it's special words, special terminology maybe that the person has come up with on their own, or it might be colorful verb and a little phrase or something. When in doubt, change it up a little bit. Or when you really, really want to use that potent phrase that you saw in their work, go ahead and use it, but just show the extent of the borrowing by surrounding it with quotation marks. And you can incorporate that into a line of your own to present it. And, of course, you should cite your source appropriately. Depending on whether you're using MLA documentation or APA documentation, those are the two that we use most often at Ivy Tech. You have to cite sources in the text in parentheses. And then you also write comprehensive entries on a works cited page or a bibliographical listing at the end. APA calls that references. MLA calls it works cited. And there will be lots of other workshops coming up all through the semester that will cover either MLA documentation or APA. But, a lot of times we get bogged down on this documentation stuff, and a lot of these things I've been talking about today, I certainly mention them, but a lot of times people get away from those, and they're so worried about how am I going to document this source. And they forget some of these other things that you have to be concerned with and forget the tips involved.